The more you speak, the more power you leak. Every update, every explanation, every need to be seen, it drains you. Marcus Aurelius knew the strongest ones grow in silence. No noise, no announcements, just discipline, solitude, and action. While others beg for validation, the Stoic sharpens in the dark. You don't need applause. You need focus. Privacy isn't isolation, it's protection. Because the moment you stop broadcasting your every move, the world loses its grip on you. In this video, I'll show you why silence is the sharpest weapon you'll ever carry. If you're done chasing approval, like, subscribe, and let's begin the transformation.
Number 1.
The discipline of quiet progress. In a world addicted to attention, silence is power. But most people fear it. They fear not being seen, not being applauded, not being praised for every step they take. Yet Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man of his time, chose to write his deepest thoughts in private, not for history, not for admiration, but for himself. His meditations were never meant to be read by the public. They were notes to his own soul. And that's the first clue to true growth. It doesn't demand recognition. It demands presence. It demands effort behind closed doors, where no one is cheering and no one is watching. Quiet progress is not glamorous. It's early mornings with no one watching. It's resisting temptation when no one would know. It's choosing consistency over intensity, principle over popularity, and solitude over showmanship. To the Stoics, this wasn't just a style of living. It was survival of the self. Because the moment your progress depends on applause, you've already lost control of your purpose. Epictetus said it without flinching. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Then that means giving up the image of improvement in order to actually grow. Most people chase the illusion. They want to look disciplined more than they want to be disciplined. But Stoicism demands the opposite. It demands stillness, solitude, and the strength to be misunderstood. Today, this principle is more radical than ever. Social media thrives on the performance of self-betterment. We post our habits, our routines, our every step of transformation, not because we're growing, but because we want people to know that we are. This isn't growth. It's theater. And Stoicism warns us, theater is a trap. Because when your motivation is to be seen, your strength becomes external, which means it's always at risk of being taken. What the world gives, the world can take. But what you build in private, it's yours. No one can steal it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about waking up in the early hours to do his duty, even when he didn't feel like it. He reminded himself that he was made for work, made for service, made for discipline, not made for comfort. And he never waited for motivation. He built routines so strong they didn't require feeling. That's the discipline of quiet progress. Doing what must be done without needing to be told, praised, or applauded for it. Not because you want to seem strong, but because you refuse to be weak. Seneca added another layer. Live as if you were always being watched. But this isn't about pretending or performing. It's about integrity. It means your character does not shift depending on whether someone is watching. You train in silence because your soul deserves that standard. You act in private with the same honor you display in public. And no matter how long it takes, the work done in secret always outlasts the work done for show. So why is this so hard? Because the ego hates invisibility. The ego feeds on proof, on being congratulated, admired, validated. But the soul doesn't need proof. The soul only needs purpose. And purpose doesn't shout. It moves slowly, consistently, like water wearing down stone. Quiet, patient, relentless. This is why the Stoic rejects spectacle. Not because he fears it, but because he knows it's a distraction. He would rather be solid than celebrated. He would rather build a life that's unshakable in silence than one that's applauded but hollow. And when no one claps for you, when no one notices the progress you're making, That's your test. That's when you double down. That's when you go deeper. Because that's the very moment most people quit. But you're not most people. You're here to grow for real, not for them, not for display, but for something higher, something lasting. Remember, quiet growth is the most dangerous kind. Why? Because when it finally reveals itself, it's already too deep to undo. So don't rush to be seen. Don't explain. Don't prove. Just build. Let your work unfold in silence. Let your discipline speak volumes. Let your actions become a force that doesn't need introduction. The Stoic path isn't about making noise. It's about making meaning. And real meaning, the kind that transforms a life, is always forged in silence.
Number 2.
Silence as a shield. There's a silence that comes from fear. And then there's a silence that comes from power. The first is timid, hesitant, and avoidant. The second is deliberate, disciplined, and indestructible. The Stoics were never loud men. They didn't posture. They didn't shout to be heard. They didn't need to, because they understood something most people still don't. When you speak less, you protect more. Your peace, your energy, your clarity. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the presence of control. And that's why it's so feared. In a world where everyone is oversharing, over-explaining, and overreacting, the person who remains calm and unreadable is dangerous. Not because they intend harm, but because they cannot be manipulated. You can't twist the words that were never said. You can't distort the meaning of what was never shared. You can't use against someone what they never gave you. Marcus Aurelius, in his writings, often returned to this principle of containment. He reminded himself again and again to remain inward, to stay rooted in reason, and not to let the noise of others disturb the quiet of his own mind. His silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. It was a refusal to allow the world to dictate his emotional state. In a letter, Seneca put it even more clearly. What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears. Yet he wasn't advocating despair. He was pointing to the futility of complaining. To speak constantly of your suffering is to relive it, but to observe it silently, to process it with calm, this is how you gain power over it. When you stop vocalizing every disturbance, you give yourself room to transform it. Let's be clear, this isn't about bottling emotions. It's about mastering the impulse to externalize them carelessly. Not every feeling deserves an audience. Not every thought needs to be shared. And not every battle requires a response. Sometimes the most powerful reply is none at all. Silence can disarm insults. It can deflect manipulation. It can expose the emptiness of provocation. But here's the deeper truth. Silence also reveals who you are. When you're no longer performing for anyone, what remains? When you sit with your thoughts, your habits, your shadows, what do you find? That's what the Stoics wanted us to confront. Not just the world, but ourselves. In silence, real silence, makes escape impossible. In stillness, everything surfaces. The good, the bad, the hidden. That's why so many people avoid it. They fill every gap with noise, music, conversation, distraction, because they fear the weight of their own mind. But the Stoic trains himself to sit in it, to welcome it, to use it. Because only in silence can you begin to understand what truly drives you, and what's merely noise absorbed from the world around you. Silence is also strategic. It creates space. Space to choose your reaction, space to listen more deeply, space to gather perspective. Most people rush to respond. They think fast reactions prove strength, but the Stoic knows better. As Epictetus warned, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And reaction, when impulsive, betrays you. It gives away your peace. But when you master that pause, when you use silence as your buffer, you reclaim control. Real strength is quiet, not because it lacks intensity, but because it doesn't waste energy proving itself. The oak tree doesn't boast about its roots, it simply stands firm in every storm. That's the kind of presence the Stoic cultivates. Quiet, grounded, watchful, and when they do speak, it's intentional, precise, rare. So, if you're serious about building unshakable peace, stop explaining so much. Stop oversharing your pain, your process, your plans. Let silence work for you. Let it protect your spirit from interference. Let it clarify what truly matters. Because once you realize silence is not emptiness, but concentrated strength, you'll never again feel the need to overexpose your mind just to feel seen. The less you say, the more you hear. And the more you hear, the more you learn. Not just about others, but about yourself. Use the silence wisely, not as a retreat, but as a shield. Not as avoidance, but as mastery. Because when the world grows loud, only the silent remains centered.
Number 3.
The weight of unspoken commitments. We live in an era where everything is spoken, posted, and publicized. Goals are shared before they're started. Promises are announced before they're tested. Declarations are made not to affirm a path, but to harvest attention. And yet in Stoic philosophy, there is a powerful counterforce to all this noise. The quiet commitment, the decision made in solitude, the vow spoken only in the heart. That's the kind of commitment that reshapes character. To the Stoics, your word was never about what you said. It was about what you lived. There was no virtue in talking about your discipline, your ambition, or your future. There was only virtue in action. This is why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't write public manifestos about who he was becoming. He wrote to remind himself what he must do, especially when no one was watching. The modern tendency to publicize every intention is, at its core, an unconscious request for permission. When you declare your plans online, you often want others to affirm them for you. But this weakens the very strength that commitment requires: solitude, self-trust, and endurance. Seneca taught that we should retreat into ourselves to find peace. That advice applies to commitment too. Real growth demands that you hold certain vows so close, they never need to be spoken, because speaking them would dilute their power. This isn't about rejecting accountability, but it does mean becoming extremely selective about where your commitments live. If they exist only on your lips, they will vanish. But if they live in your behavior, they will endure. A silent commitment is heavier than a loud promise. It anchors your actions, it binds your choices, and it leaves no room for performance and stress. Think about it. A person who constantly talks about becoming disciplined often isn't. A person who declares they're going to change usually hasn't. It's the one who quietly adjusts their habits, who wakes early without a post, who trains without an audience. That person is far more dangerous. Why? Because they don't need to be believed. They only need to become. This is why Epictetus told his students not to show off their philosophy through words, but through life. He said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That kind of embodiment doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself over time, through consistency, through quiet transformation. There is also a sacredness in keeping your intentions unspoken. When you don't share your plans, you protect their energy. You give them space to take root without the pressure of external expectations. This isn't superstition, it's psychology. Studies show that when we talk about our goals, we sometimes get a premature sense of accomplishment, which makes us less likely to follow through. The Stoics didn't need science to understand this. They simply knew that the real battle wasn't about being seen starting. It was about continuing when no one was watching. So how do you live this? First, you treat your personal vows like sacred contracts. You don't casually announce them. You etch them into your days. You build them into your choices. And when you're tempted to talk about them, you pause and let your behavior speak instead. If it's real, it doesn't need a microphone. Second, you allow people to misunderstand you. Let them think you're not growing. Let them assume nothing's changing. Let them guess. Because your job is not to convince, it's to evolve. When the time is right, your life will show what your mouth never had to say. And third, you remember that every unspoken promise carries weight. Not because it was announced, but because it was chosen in silence. These are the commitments that last. Not because you told the world, but because you honored them long enough for the results to speak on your behalf. Ultimately, the Stoic doesn't broadcast his becoming. He becomes and in that becoming, he earns something stronger than attention. He earns respect, rooted in quiet integrity. So don't just make promises, make progress. Make effort, make sacrifices, and do it in silence. Because the more sacred the vow, the less it needs to be spoken. And the more powerful your actions become, the less you'll feel the need to explain them.
Number 4.
The unreadable mind. There is a kind of power that comes not from what you say, but from what no one can figure out about you. In a world that trains you to reveal everything, your plans, your struggles, your emotions, Stoicism teaches you to guard your inner world like a fortress. Because once people know how to move you, they can control you. And once they know what you fear, they can break you. To the Stoic, the ideal mind is not just disciplined, it's unreadable. Not because it hides in fear, but because it radiates stability. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Though he held the highest office in the empire, he never let his emotions sit on the surface. In his meditations, he reminded himself to be firm, inward, composed. Not cold, not fake, just self-contained. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb. It means your emotions are yours, not public property. Most people overshare in the name of vulnerability. But Stoics knew that vulnerability without discretion is a liability. You cannot build a strong life when your emotions are available for anyone to poke, provoke, or play with. Therefore, you protect your peace by becoming harder to read, not as a tactic of manipulation, but as a boundary of self-respect. Now, the unreadable mind isn't about being mysterious for the sake of ego. It's about training yourself not to flinch, not to react, not to explain everything you feel. When someone insults you, you don't erupt. When someone praises you, you don't melt. You stay rooted. You let silence carry the weight of your power. Epictetus was clear. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. If your inner world is too easy to access, then anyone's opinion becomes a wrecking ball. This is why the Stoic sharpens his response time. He slows it down. Instead of reacting, he breathes. Instead of defending, he observes. And in that space, he builds control. Most people lose themselves in the noise of reaction. But the unreadable mind stays steady. It's not that it doesn't feel, it simply doesn't bleed in public. Seneca advised, let your mind be a sanctuary. A sanctuary is sacred. It's protected. Not everyone gets in. Not every emotion deserves exposure. And not every situation requires your full expression. Sometimes peace is preserved by saying nothing, not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. In a world that encourages you to announce every emotion, every hardship, every small thought, being unreadable is rare, and rare things are powerful. When people don't know your next move, they can't predict your weaknesses. When they don't know your emotional patterns, they can't play on them. That's not suppression. That's sovereignty. Think about someone like Viktor Frankl. Though not a Stoic in title, he embodied the spirit of one. Even while enduring unimaginable suffering, he held fast to one truth. No one could take his inner freedom unless he gave it away. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That's the Stoic ideal. Your mind is your kingdom. Don't give away the keys. So how do you become unreadable in a Stoic sense? First, stop narrating your every thought. Not everyone needs access to your inner dialogue. Keep some things sacred. Let your mind be a place of silence and strength, not noise and confusion. Second, master your expressions. You don't have to smile when you're unsure. You don't have to frown when challenged. Let your face become calm water, reflective, but not disturbed. Third, refuse the urge to always clarify yourself. The need to be understood is often the biggest leak in personal power. Let people wonder. Let them guess. You don't owe them the blueprint to your soul. Finally, practice presence without performance. Be so grounded in who you are that you no longer need to announce it. You simply are. That's the core of unreadability. Not hiding but holding. Not secrecy but strength. The Stoic doesn't aim to be mysterious. He aims to be unshakable. He trains his mind to become a fortress, not to keep people out, but to keep his own peace in. When you no longer leak your thoughts in every conversation, when you no longer flinch at every criticism, when your emotions are no longer a public display, but a private practice, you become unreadable. And in that, you become untouchable.
Number 5.
Power comes from not reacting. If you want to measure someone's strength, don't look at how loudly they speak. Look at how calmly they respond. In a reactive world, silence is power. Stillness is strength. And the one who doesn't react, who pauses, who breathes, who thinks, is the one who controls the outcome. This is the foundation of Stoic mastery, the refusal to be moved by what doesn't deserve your energy. The Stoics believed that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies your power. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control events, we can always control how we interpret and respond to them. That space between what happens and how you respond, that's where you meet yourself. That's where character is forged. And that's where most people fall apart, because they've never been taught to slow down. Most people react instantly. A harsh word and they lash out. A minor slight and they spiral. A moment of frustration and they explode. They give their peace away to every impulse. But the Stoic understands, emotional discipline isn't about suppression, it's about precision. You don't repress the emotion. You just don't let it drive the car. You let it rise, let it pass, and then choose your response. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He faced betrayal, criticism, loss, illness, and yet he rarely responded with anger. Why? Because he trained himself to pause. He trained himself to return to reason. This was not passivity, it was power held back. Like a lion calmly observing instead of lunging. Anyone can react. Only the strong can hold. If your emotions are always visible, you're always vulnerable. The more you react, the more predictable you become. And when you're predictable, you're easy to manipulate. But when you learn to pause, to detach, to observe, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are untouchable. Seneca wrote about premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. He mentally rehearsed life's difficulties so that when they came, he was prepared. That's not negativity. That's mental armor. And when you wear that armor, you don't flinch. You don't scream. You act, not from panic, but from principle. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming masterful. It's about choosing when, how, and whether to respond at all. The Stoic doesn't ignore injustice, but they refuse to become unjust in their reaction. They speak when it's useful. They act when it's aligned. They remain calm when others collapse, not because they don't feel, but because they've trained themselves to remain upright in emotional storms. Viktor Frankl, whose ideas mirror Stoicism, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That quote alone captures the Stoic path. Your life is not determined by what happens. It's shaped by what you do next. So how do you live this? First, slow down. You don't owe anyone an instant reaction. Buy time with silence. Let the emotion rise and let it pass. Most reactions come from chaos, not clarity. Second, reframe the situation. Ask one, is this worth my peace? Most of the time it isn't. Third, return to your principles. You are not here to entertain every insult. You are not here to be baited into outrage. You are here to build strength, not to perform it. This is why the strongest people you meet often say the least. It's not because they're shy. It's because they've outgrown the need to react to everything. They've seen the cost of constant reaction, and they've chosen peace over performance. They understand that silence is not submission. It's a strategy. If you want to reclaim your power, start here. Stop reacting. Not because you're weak, but because you're done wasting energy. When you master the pause, you master the moment. And when you master the moment, you master your life. The Stoic isn't unfeeling, they're unfazed or what we can know once. They aren't cold. They're composed, and they don't react, not because they can't, but because they choose not to. And in that choice lies the truest kind of freedom, the freedom from being anyone else's puppet. Number 6, emotionless efficiency. There's a common misconception that being stoic means being cold, that to be efficient, composed, and detached, you must suppress your humanity. But Stoicism was never about becoming a machine. It was about becoming sovereign. And the Stoics understood that true clarity, the kind that moves mountains, comes not from being emotionless, but from not being ruled by emotion. To operate with emotionless efficiency doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let those feelings distort your duty. You act with full presence, undistracted by highs or lows, without needing external motivation or validation. You simply do what must be done, calmly, precisely, consistently. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the solitude of his own mind, said, "Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. Not praise, not blame, not the outcome, only the action." This is emotionless efficiency, choosing the path of excellence without being dragged by emotional storms. It's not coldness, it's clarity in motion. Most people live on the edge of their feelings. If they feel excited, they move. If they feel discouraged, they stop. Their emotional state dictates their output. But the Stoic flips this. He acts according to principle, not mood. He shows up when he's tired. He speaks the truth when it's uncomfortable. He trains even when no one's watching. He doesn't wait to feel perfect. He begins and lets discipline take over. This isn't easy. It requires daily self-command. It requires rising above the temptation to act from impulse. Most of all, it requires being okay with not feeling okay. Because emotionless efficiency doesn't mean you don't have bad days. It means you don't let bad days have you. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And so much of our inefficiency comes not from what's happening, but from our emotional interpretation of it. The worry, the doubt, the inner drama. But Stoicism asks, what if you stopped needing to feel perfect before you acted? What if you dropped the story and simply executed the task? Imagine how much progress you could make if you stopped arguing with yourself. If you stopped making your work dependent on your mood, if you stopped waiting to be inspired and instead became reliable. Emotionless efficiency is the art of showing up clean. No baggage, no drama. Just presence, just action. And the great artists, thinkers, and creators who lived this didn't do it with noise. They did it with silence. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, not as a Stoic, but as a man of immense focus. He sketched, painted, studied, not for applause, but for mastery. He moved without waiting to be moved. That's emotional detachment, not withdrawal, but direction. Likewise, the Stoic doesn't chase moods. He builds momentum. He sees emotions as visitors, not rulers. They're signals, not commands. He listens, but he doesn't obey blindly. In doing so, he protects his energy. He becomes efficient, not by rushing, but by staying undistracted. So how do you live this? First, define your non-negotiables. What must get done no matter what? Then act without delay. Don't negotiate with your emotions. Don't overthink. Start before you feel ready. The mind will catch up. Third, measure success by your follow-through, not your feelings. A good day isn't one where you felt great. It's one where you followed through, even when you didn't. Finally, observe yourself from the outside. Imagine watching yourself move through your day. Would you respect what you see? Are you focused, or are you being pulled by feelings? That level of self-awareness builds discipline. It builds consistency, and it builds freedom. Emotionless efficiency isn't about becoming robotic. It's about becoming free. Free from the noise. Free from the lie that you must feel ready to act. Free to move with purpose. The Stoic moves without needing to be hyped, understood, or congratulated. He moves because it must be done. When you reach this level, something shifts. You stop wasting energy on resistance. You no longer need to explain your path, defend your silence, or justify your choices. You stop outsourcing your momentum to emotion. Instead, you become a force, not frantic, not loud, but deliberate. Grounded, steady. The Stoic doesn't move with hype. He moves with purpose. He moves because it's right, because it's time, because nothing, not discomfort, not confusion, not fear, gets to stand in the way of what must be done. That's not emotionless. That's discipline. And in the end, that discipline becomes your freedom. You don't need applause to grow. You don't need to announce your progress to make it real. The strongest transformations always happen in silence, when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, and when every step is taken from discipline, not desire. The world will try to pull you out of yourself, into noise, into reaction, into performance. But you must stay rooted, stay private, stay sovereign. The Stoic path isn't loud. It's deep, it's deliberate, and it's yours alone to walk. So let others chase attention. Let others beg to be seen. You choose to build in silence. Choose to let your strength speak for you. Because the one who grows in silence doesn't just gain power. He becomes it. If this message spoke to something inside you, if you're ready to walk the quiet path of self-mastery, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your journey begins in silence. Let it echo through action,